So anyways, here we are, Barbara, Willett, thank you very much. Talk about your mom and dad.
Um, I don't, perhaps I have somewhat of a unique background in the sense that I'm 86 years old, but in this old body is the spirit of a 40-year-old, and I'm lucky to have energy. What I'm getting at is that my parents were married 8 years, and then I was born and my dad left. And he left when I was 6 months old and did not support me. Back then, divorce, there was a stigma to divorce in 1940. So basically, as I recall, growing up and going to Dearborn High School, that I didn't know anyone else who came from a divorced home. So I would say that, the other thing that very few people know, but I don't bring it up because I was actually a foster child before there was a foster child. I lived in 2 different homes with families before I lived with my mother at about age 5. And why was that? My mother came from a very poor family. She was Canadian, but a naturalized citizen now. And she could not take care of me as a baby, so she had to go back to work. Fortunately, the 2 families that I lived with were Ozzie and Harriet, happy. There's a dog. There were a couple children in it. So I don't remember I've been told, or my recollection is that I had a very happy 4 years. What was interesting is that I was in one home, and why I'm telling you this is I think this is what's formulated me as a person or built my character or personality. The first home I was in for 2 years, and the woman became ill. And then my mother had to find a second home. So at 2.5, I was placed found another loving home. Why I'm saying this is that my memory is that I had to be good because, quote, my mother would say, you have to be good because they won't keep you if you're not good. Maybe I'm making that up, but somehow I feel that way. So I was a good child. I didn't cry. I didn't want to cause any trouble for anyone. So basically, lived with my mother then when I was 5, and we didn't own our own home until I was 10. But basically, I had the kind of mother back then, and this is, I think, a telling tale. I was a teenager, and she said, I'm going to tell you how the real world works, not how we would like it to work. I said, well, what's that? You and I have to wear white gloves. Well, what does that mean? Because there's no man in the home and I'm divorced, I'm not going to date, I'm not going to drink, and you're not going to be running the streets because people will say, well, what do you expect? You know, she's divorced. So as a consequence of that, I had to be a good girl. And then, well, I think that my background, although I was happy, my mother, we had a happy home. Basically, at that time it was unusual for University of Michigan to give full rides to women because at that time, 1958, when I graduated from Dearborn High, there were 2 women accepted to Michigan and 5 men, and then I got a scholarship. So I was, yes, a valedictorian, a good student. Now, Michigan opened my world. We didn't have a car. I had never really been out of Dearborn. I never went to camp. And so going to University of Michigan, but those people who know me, I guess I'm confident because I've always been able to succeed if I tried something. Not to say you don't have a failure now and then. Anyway, I went to Michigan, Ann Arbor, 40,000 people, and I went, here I am. At Michigan, well, you hate to say, don't tell people this. I was picked as one of 10 women, and we modeled for Jacobson's on all the football Saturdays. And they got paid for that. I did it because I wanted to get the money, because I needed the money. And
by the way, for the camera, what's Jacobson's?
Oh, Jacobson's was our high-end store in Michigan, many branches, men's apparel, women's apparel, very lovely clothes. And also they were in Florida, because of course Michiganders or Midwesterns will go to Florida. So also at Michigan, it's hard to make your mark when there's 40-some thousand people, I was one of 2,000 people who applied. I was like, we called it the Supreme Court. It was called Joint Judiciary. We actually wore robes, and we were the only Big Ten school that had full power to expel people or to impose fines. And you couldn't wear, we wore our robes, and the regents were in the meetings, but they sat behind us. And so I had wanted to be an attorney, and I thought, well, I'm going to learn. But the other people on this Joint Judiciary Council were much more advanced and smarter than I was, so it was a learning experience. But anyway, I had a good time at Michigan, and that's where I met Howard, and we married after Michigan, and we went to Boston.
How did you meet?
Howard and I met because, how do we meet at Michigan? Well, I told you about my background. So I was leery of men, rightly so, my mother's experience. And so when I was one of these girls at Michigan, I wouldn't kiss anyone goodnight. And I was a little bit, not flippant, but I didn't share myself with guys. I went dated because, remember, at that time there were 5 guys for 2 women. So you could be unattractive and still get a date at Michigan. In fact, the saying back then was, if you want a good-looking girl, go to Michigan State. You're not going to find them at Ann Arbor. Howard and I met when we were sophomores, and because I had kind of a standoffish kind of thing that maybe appealed to him, and that's how we met. We had the classic romance, college romance. He was president of the SAE House, which is one of the largest houses at Michigan, and also they were characters. Bill Freehan was one of his classmates at University of Michigan, Detroit Tiger pitcher, catcher. And so we had a great time, and he then went on to graduate school. Then we married after college and moved to Boston. And now you take 2 Midwesterners and we go to Boston. Our world opened again to the east, and we loved it and took advantage of everything that Boston and Maine and Cape Cod and Nantucket could afford us. We were there 5 years. His father, George Howard Jr., Willett Jr., had a manufacturing plant that had been the grandfather's. And my husband did not want to work for his dad. He worked for Raytheon, a defense contractor in Boston. And I taught high school English, and I was the cheerleader advisor. And at that time, hockey was very big on the East Coast compared to the Midwest at that time. So every Saturday, Howard and I, he came with me to chaperone. We were in the Boston Gardens and walked with the team. But it was a good time. Came back, thought we would move to Birmingham, Michigan, where his family was, but he wanted a little distance. He thinks a little distance is good for everybody. So we moved to Grosse Pointe. And there we are in Grosse Pointe, which well, I'm still here. It's 2026, and today is June 14th, Flag Day. So I've been in Grosse Pointe. Grosse Pointe, we loved it. At first, when you come here and you don't have contact.
You were in California for a period.
Oh, well, yeah, I was going to say, we were here, and then from 2011 to 2022, about 11 years, we lived in California in the East Bay area of San Francisco because our daughter had remarried, and it's noteworthy, she married James McMillan, and the McMillan family is here in Grosse Pointe. They said, oh, we would never move back to Grosse Pointe. Oh, it's too small, and everyone, of course, they moved back. Very briefly, the 11 years there, I'm I should say, throughout my life, I am a doer, I say, and I also work hard at things. I have been only woman elected at the Grosse Pointe Shores Council, and my brother-in-law Gordon helped my campaign and went out there and helped me get the vote out. You never do it by yourself. It's always with other people. Been board president. I was president of the Junior League of Detroit back then, and I'm kind of a dark horse. I think it was, I did not go through the chairs, meaning the tradition of the Junior League would be, oh, you served on this, or then you were on the board, maybe you're the secretary. But I was sort of picked right out of the group, and I was president, and we had a very successful year. We had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about working with people. I think that's interesting. Working with people. That's working with people is how you get things done. You can't do it by yourself. And if you sit on boards, and people have to either you have to give the leadership that's worth following. And I've tried to do that. And I've been lucky to be leaders of many organizations. Let's see. 10 years in California. Well, after there was a group called Black Hawk Women, and they have all come out to visit me here. Not all, many of them, several maybe. I was a member for a year and a half, and then I became president. And one of the women said, she's only been here a year and a half, and I've been here 4 years. So I was president of the group of 300 women. But again, you have to provide leadership that people want to embrace or follow. And we had a great 10 years. Howard had an unusual blood cancer called multiple myeloma, which I had never heard of, nor he. It's treatable, but not curable. And it's only significant in my mentioning this. Howard and I are pretty stoical. We were accepting of the diagnosis, and also realized that we had a lot of good years, and he never complained. And while there, we did everything. He was under treatment, but we still could participate and do things. And then we came back to Grosse Pointe, and my daughter Wendy, I think it's important to mention, we have an only child, Wendy. I'm 5'5", she's 5'10", and she was platinum blonde, and I was a very dark brunette. And she had big blue eyes, and I don't have those. And it's important to mention her because we were very fortunate. When you have only one child, I think they realize the expectations. You don't tell them that you have expectations, but somehow they sense that they have to be it all. You know, they have to be the athlete, they have to be the student, they have to be the good person. And she was all that. We were lucky. And let's see. So coming back here, she and her husband James McMillan found 17111 for me. I bought it while I was in California, and Howard was ill, and Wendy took the pictures. Oh, you've got to come here. Oh, Mom, you and Dad, you're just going to love it. You're going to be up in the penthouse. This is going to be wonderful. So she, being a very she's a can-do woman, had it all painted and the floors redone before I had to move in. And then back here, coming back when you've been away was easy because I had a lot of ties or connections. Grosse Pointe Memorial Church, where my husband had been baptized as a baby, and his parents were married there, and then our daughter Wendy had been married there. So I plugged back into volunteering. It's only about 5 blocks from here, down on Jefferson. And then I reactivated, if you will, with the junior league, the older group called Sustainers, and we have a lot of activities. And so I've been participating in that. Also, I'm on my condominium board, and I learned from Pete Ronan and all the rest of the members. They're very conscientious. I stress, and they agree, we're stewards of the money. And that was one thing that I was taught, that when you sit on a board, you should know what the finances are like and what's going on. I'm an English teacher and journalism by my educational background. I didn't have a finance background, so studying the financials is a little difficult for me, but I do it. And if I don't understand something, I'll go to Bill Gerke, who lives here at 17111, and he always explains what it means. So I think all my life I'm conscientious, and I try to be careful with other people's money. When I sat on the Shores Council, there's a little anecdote that taught me about politics and what it must be like at a local level or the state level or the federal. One thing about local politics is you can get to the politician. So if I and my group ever on the Shores Council did anything that the residents didn't like, they were at your door. So, and they would do that. But anyway, on the Shores Council, and this opened my eyes. Those of you who've lived in Grosse Pointe for years, there was a storm, a serious storm many years ago, and a man who was not a resident of the Points was on the Farms Park, and he was swept off the pier and drowned through this storm. Again, not a resident, and how he maybe was a guest that he was there. Now that's the Farms. I'm on the Shores Council, and they were all men. And at the next meeting, one of the men said, "We need to give $20,000 to this man's family." And I listened and I said, well, first of all, he's not a member of Grosse Pointe Shores, and we didn't know him. He was in the Farms. And, oh, Barb, we've got to do this. And so I said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we all open our checkbooks and write our personal checks to him rather than using the residents' money? I was outvoted. And that's kind of the light bulb went on, is that, when you're dealing with other people's money, it is so easy to spend it or to give it away. And that impressed me. So I only wonder, in Lansing, what's going on, or in the federal government, there's waste everywhere. And but I don't know anything specific, but that was my one experience. I think that's about sums up everything. I would end to say that my mother probably had a great influence on me. She was a strong woman. And then the other influence was my husband, Howard. He had integrity. He was very smart about finance, and his brother Gordon would attest to that. And then maybe I'm influenced now by my daughter. I think about, oh, did I influence her? And now that I'm older, it seems like the roles have reversed. I hear that from people here at 17111, that we who used to tell our children what to do, they are now telling us what to do. So that role reversal is amusing, can be sometimes frustrating, but I think that's just the way it is.
I see firsthand, I'm a newbie, I'm a newbie at this condo, your leadership skills. If you had to write a paragraph or two as to what it is that what qualities makes you a leader?
Interesting. My mother told me that ever since I was 5 years old, I was in the kindergarten, she said, you stepped out on the stage with the class and said, "We are the kindergartners." Okay, what would it be? I don't want to flatter myself. I have a lot of flaws. And I want to make a comment. When you're a leader and you do things, you have to be prepared for the criticism. If you don't make decisions or do things, you're not going to be criticized. But when you do, you have to be prepared for those who don't like what you're doing. I don't know why, but I don't know why, but I would say I've always had self-confidence. And when I say that, I don't want to sound pompous about it, but I think what happened, luckily, I can tell you honestly, almost anything I ever applied for, it happened. If I ran for an office, it happened. So you'll build on your confidence. I make errors because, again, when you're a leader and you try to do things, you will make errors. You'll make errors. Oh, one last thing that was very significant, and maybe the people watching, if you're ever going to watch it, some would know. My brother-in-law, Gordon, would know. I was recruited when I was about 42 years old to come down to Detroit, and Coleman Young was the mayor at that time, and apply for this job. And Barbara, you could be development director for the Children's Center. Well, what's a development director? You have to raise money. Well, I had not really ever raised money. Long and short, I was there 10 years. And I remember they hired me, and I sold myself cheap because I said, oh, $30,000 salary, because I didn't know whether I could do. They needed to raise $7 million. They wanted to do a capital campaign. So the first day, I'm in the basement in an empty room with a desk, an empty Rolodex, and a phone. And that time, it wasn't even a computer there. Anyway, the 10 years were the most interesting 10 years, I'd say, of my life. I did raise the $7 million. Again, you never do it alone. But the people in Grosse Pointe that know me well, they all got involved. I got my friends involved. But the one thing I wanted to comment is, I'm not a particularly creative person. I'm maybe more of an organizer type. Well, where are you going to get the money? At that time, Detroit was fairly poor. We had leadership there that wasn't really fond of outside organizations. But anyway, so how do you raise $7 million? And because I'd been president of the Junior League of Detroit, I had access to people they would return my call. So I started out with General Motors, I started out with Ford Motors. Billy Ford was one of our neighbors in Grosse Pointe at the time, and he responded. But anyway, pretty soon, the people in Detroit, I couldn't get any more money. Where am I going to get the money? When I went to the suburbs, one man who owned a company looked at me and said, Barbara, I got the hell out of Detroit because my place was being broken into. I don't want to give money to anything in Detroit. So one day I was sitting at my desk. By that time, I had 2 or 3 people on my staff. And I thought, what about a radio auction? I'd never done an auction. Well, WJR said, we'll do it. I sold it to them. And this went throughout the Midwest. Little did I know the power of WJR's radio waves. For 10 years, I wrote every script. WJR gave me all the free time. Mitch Albom I knew because the head of WJR said, you know, before we have a few, not prima donnas, but we have a few stars here. And before they're going to give up their time, you go and talk to them. So Mitch Albom and Paul W. Smith, who's a friend, he was on the WGR, he took over J.P. McCarthy's spot. And that radio auction was one, I had 300 volunteers. I had to set up a volunteer room. I got AT&T to donate. That was the old school. The cell phones weren't even, they were just coming around. I don't even know if they were. So we had 30 people manning the phones, and I was like the maestro, and I had a chalkboard, old-fashioned chalkboard. People would call in, and what I want to tell you is what you learned the first year. Where am I going to get the items? Well, I knocked on doors. I actually knocked on doors up and down Kercheval or Woodward or Mac. Anyway, somebody called in and donated. They have a llama farm. Did you know there are 100 llama farms in Michigan? Yeah. I sold the llamas. And the little anecdote humor here is that, so we're in the middle of this auction and people are bidding in. Somebody's, a volunteer saying, Barbara, number 33, $200 on that. And then Barbara, there's somebody on the phone. He wants to know the name of the llama. The name of the llama. I got on the phone and I called the llama farm. What? Little Speedy Car. It's Little Speedy Car. The next year, I knew the color of the llama, the name of the llama's mother, because what people, when they're buying. And one other last little anecdote of somebody, a man who I've never had met, every auction, we did it 10 years, he called in and he said, Barb, you've got my credit card. I said, no, Barb, put 500 on this and this. One time he called me from the airport. And he's called one of the volunteers and he said, I'm getting on a plane, but whatever, put whatever you need on that. I did finally get to meet the man, and I asked him, you know, why did you do this? Every year you spend all this money. Well, Barb, he said, he lived in the thumb of Michigan, and I went to visit him, and he said, I've got 6 kids, so all this stuff I buy, I just give it to them for their Christmas presents. Yeah. So that 10 years, that's how I met the Red Wings, and one time when they won the Stanley Cup, I had them, the whole team sign the jersey. Wow. And you know what that went for. And the last little one, you'll get a chuckle out of. What you can do if you have confidence, and I'm never afraid to receive a no or get turned down. I think you have to, as a leader, be prepared for that. Well, I wrote a 1-page letter to Marion Illich. Dear Marion, I came from Dearborn, and I know you came from either Dearborn Heights or that area too. And here's my little story. Marion, would you give for the WJR radio auction for Children's Center 2 seats on Redbird for 2 people to ride with the team to an away game? And also, could you provide them hotel room and dinner with the Red Wings the night before the game? Everyone in my department, oh my God, Barbara, I got it. Marion did. And that went at that time, 10,000, 15,000, you put it on the air and it just took off. And so we had that for about 3 years. So those are the kind of things, if you're willing to try and risk, that is not going to work. But I had to mention the radio auction because people still, by volunteers, I recruited everyone in Grosse Pointe on a Saturday because they were working. Right. And they all, anyway, it was all done with volunteers and people calling in. But I had no awareness, didn't realize that people, at nighttime, the WGR radio waves went to the surrounding states. So I'd get calls from Ohio and that kind of thing.
Fantastic. Now, there's also a Steve Yzerman story you told me off camera. Why don't you tell it on camera?
Well, because again, I met Stevie. I called him Stevie. He could have been my son, perhaps. And he, at that time, the Red Wings were winning the Stanley. They were hot. And he lived in Grosse Pointe. And so I took I was very frugal. I have to say, I got teased about it. The first year of the auction, I bought no supplies. I actually got shoe boxes, empty shoe boxes, and I put pencils in and that, because I didn't know whether we'd make money. And if you're going to, I was very known for, I never took anybody to lunch. I didn't take one person to lunch to get money. General Motors gave us $50,000. Ford gave us, in the auction I had a brand new from Billy Ford, a Ford Explorer, and that was my my auction item, and we sold it at the end. But when I called on the CEOs, I said, I've given you a one-pager because I don't think you have time to read everything and I promise you I'm not going to take you to lunch, and that my department, we don't spend any money on that kind of thing. And the Pistons gave money and stuff. So people believed that. They thought, okay, she's not going to be taking the money and padding your salary. So with that in mind, I took a paper bag and put a pen in it and a note and a Red Wings jersey. And I said, Dear Stevie, I live in Lockmore, on Lockmore in the Shores, and if you'll sign this, it will go for the auction. I won't use it for personal use, and please put the pen back in the bag. And sure enough, about a week later, I picked up the phone and somebody said, is Barbara there? I said, this is Barbara. Stevie, he said, your pen's in the bag and the shirt I signed, it's in the mailbox, you can pick it up. So that was the fun, and what a nice man he was, nice man.
It continues to be. So talk a little bit about, you're here now, and you and Pete really are a tandem of social activities and kind of doers. Is there a vision for 17111 that you guys talk about that? Do you say 5 years from now we'd like it to be this?
That's an interesting question about the vision part. I would say that some people are very talented about looking ahead in the vision, or that they think that way. I should think more that way. I don't think I always, maybe I'm so caught up in the here and now. I guess there's things that have to be done today, so you get caught up like that. I think that, and not just Pete, and my brother-in-law Gordon Willett has been very instrumental in helping with policy, and also Bill Gerke, who's a wonder, and you'll hear him at the annual meeting. He can take very complicated financials and boil it down so that you understand what we have, what we are going to be spending, and where we're going. As far as the vision for 17111, we've really been concentrating the last couple years, and it shows, on the infrastructure. The building in 1972, and now, like many structures in Grosse Pointe, maybe they had lead pipes, or maybe things that need to be updated. For example, our basement, all the tile was torn up, and we found asbestos, which was common back then. That had to be remediated and expensively done before we could put down any new flooring. So I would say right now we've been concentrating on bringing things up to code. The elevators need to be brought up to code, and we're concerned about that, and we're very watchful of the money, because it's everybody's money who lives here. I think just having 17111 be a place where it's a comfortable place to live, talking about vision, and making it more of a community. We don't live in isolation here. We try to make it a community through our Monday night cocktails. And interesting enough, many people don't drink. That surprised me a little bit. When I first moved here, I thought, oh, that cocktail hour. And that's because people are older and on medication, and so they're very watchful. So we don't do a lot of big drinking. I want and people have a good time and get to know each other through those Monday nights.
You agreed to come down here today. Was there a question you thought I might ask that I haven't?
No, no. I think that you listened well, and you covered a lot.
This will be off. I'll edit this out. But did you ever catch up with your dad, your natural father?
No, briefly, and it's interesting because I could have become bitter. He didn't support me, and it was antagonistic with my mother. My mother never discussed him. I don't think she ever mentioned his name because I think that she carried the pain inside her. I chose, and I remember thinking this when I was about 17. Oh, no, I'm going to say, you always are like the child. Just when you think that you're mature and nothing's going to bother you. I remember going to Michigan, and there would be Father's Day weekend. I was in a sorority, and I thought, he's going to come and see me. He knows where I am. Because his aunt was my great aunt, a spinster, and she bought my books for college. She bought all my college books at Michigan. And I waited that day, and he didn't come, and I thought, gosh, you're 17, 18, and you're still thinking that this is going to happen. So but one last little comment about, so I try not to be bitter, and I just looked at, I would say I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic, and I've been blessed with energy. I have to tell you that they used to call me the Energizer Bunny. I have energy. I don't ever get tired. I know I'm tired, but I don't ever lie down. I'm able to keep going. Well, at one point, this is a little interesting anecdote. My father, my great aunt, I was close to, she died. But that was my father. My father's the only child. That was his aunt. He called me. How he knew her? He called me on Lockmore, on the phone, and he said that my aunt had died, and when the funeral was. Okay, I went there. Didn't talk to him. But a few days later, or weeks later, received a call from an attorney, and the attorney said, "I am your great aunt's attorney, and she left you and your father." Not a lot of money, but it's divided equally. And I said, and where this word came from, I said, I can't come to your office. He said, why not? I said, my father and I are estranged. And I used that word. Oh, he said, oh. So we hung up. When Howard got home, I told him, and he said, I'll go. And this is the part that warms your heart. So my husband went, and he looked like a good businessman, the white shirt, the tie, confident. He walked in and saw my father and the lawyer. He shook hands with my father and sat down. And the attorney said, well, Richard wants to cash all his stocks in and divide the money. And my husband, and this is the part that warms the heart, he said, no, I don't think so. You see, Barbara doesn't need the money. And you see, of course, all those years he didn't support me, I needed the money. He said, so Barbara will take stocks, and you know what? I'll pick the stocks that she wants. Well, the attorney turned to my father, and he said, give him what he wants. And so my husband came home, and he said, this is yours. And that was like the only thing I ever had received from him. But the poignant part is that my husband would say, Barbara doesn't need the money. Yeah. And that was sort of like, so anyway, that's kind of fun.
Kind of touche.
Yeah, that was it. So.
Great. Well, is there a message? I mean, we're going to wrap this up here, but you've been so gracious. Is your daughter's going to see this at some point? Any message you want to give to your daughter? Oh,
well, there's people here who know Wendy, and Gordon in particular would know her, has known her since she was born. And I guess my message to my daughter, I wouldn't want to presume to tell her anything because our children know what they're doing. I would say, I hadn't thought about this, but lead your life with courage. Just have courage. And that will take you far if you have courage. And you do have courage, Wendy, but keep it up. Keep it up.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Keep your energy up here at the 17-111.
I hope so. Thank you very much. Thank you.